Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly sync. It is October 11th, 2018. We are well into fall, which is kind of crazy. I think the year is just flying by for me. Hopefully things are going well for everybody as well. So real quick, we like to talk about, update what this call is all about and what the purpose of the call is. So this exists under the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and we started these special interest groups because we needed a way to focus on certain topic areas. Our once-a-month call was just there was just too much we wanted to cover in it, and we couldn't get down into any detail at all. So we started these special interest groups. This was the first on SharePoint Framework and client-side development, and we have a second call that is on opposite weeks of this call for things like the PowerShell, CSOM development, managed code development, the more traditional. That's probably the wrong way to say that, but the other ways of doing SharePoint development. And so this one, we're focused on open discussion around SharePoint Framework and client-side development patterns. So all things kind of associated with client-side development in SharePoint, even if it's not necessarily a SharePoint Framework, though of course we encourage use of SharePoint Framework, but there's other client-side development patterns as well, and we'll discuss those. We also discuss some of the patterns and practices community features, such as PnP libraries, the Office 365 CLI, and the SPFx reusable controls. So we'll do updates on all of those in this call. And then we also do, which we should find a way to work into this slide, but we do some great community demos, which I think is one of the more valuable parts of these calls, in addition to the updates, but get to see what folks out there in the community are building and how they're using the various technologies, which I inevitably learn something from on each call. So 2 links down there at the bottom, SPPnP-community will take you to the Microsoft Tech Community SharePoint section of that site, which is a great place to ask general questions, architecture questions, how would you design or how would you solve such and such a problem? Questions that might not be related specifically to a certain library or a certain project. That's a great forum for those. Second link there, spdev-docs, will take you to the all the developer documentation for SharePoint all up. So whether you're new to SharePoint Framework and want to get started with that, you can walk through a set of tutorials and articles, get started with SharePoint Framework. As well, if you're doing managed code development, CSOM development, add-in development, all the documentation for that is there as well. So definitely check that out. It's your one-stop shop for all SharePoint documentation. Big note, just want to throw this out there at the start, and we'll mention it again at the end. The General Dev Special Interest Group for October 18th, which is next week, is canceled. So apologies for that. We've got some folks on vacation, and we've got some folks with other conflicts, myself included, who can't make that call, so we're going to have that call canceled for next week. We'll resume as normal on November 1st. So apologies to miss a call, but we will be back November 1st as normal, and this call will be back again on October 25th. So we're just going to miss the 1 week. Sorry for the disruption, but we will be back as normal November 1st. So agenda for our call today, we'll do our engineering update about SharePoint Framework. We have patterns and practices updates for the 3 community areas there, the PnP.js, the Office 365 CLI, and SPFx reusable controls. And then as well, we've got 2 great demos, one from Joel on an SPFx web part using Visio JavaScript APIs. So a cool solution there integrating SPFx and Visio. And then Andrew has another great demo with resizing a web part with an iframe embed thing. It's got that working. He's selling himself short. It's a great demo. All demos are great, but we'll check that out here shortly. And then at the end, we might have a little bit of time for Q&A, but as always, you can use the IM window for questions, and we'll do our best to respond to those as we go. Before we get started, I want to always mention opportunities to participate in this call, PnP as a program itself, and specifically some of the JavaScript areas. So always, we welcome you and encourage you and invite you, anyone out there, to demo a SharePoint Framework solution or a project that has any of the @PnP client-side solutions whether that be the libraries, the CLI, the reusable controls, any of that stuff. That could be inside or outside of SharePoint Framework. But would love to see those demos. Encourage you, if you have a demo or have an idea for a demo, just reach out. We'll get you on the agenda. It won't necessarily be the immediately next call, but we'll get you a slot on the agenda in an upcoming call, and would love to see those demos. As I've said, I think that's one of the better parts of these calls and the more valuable ones, to see what everybody out there in the community is working on. Also, you can contribute on GitHub. So contributions on GitHub take the form of submitting issues, which are always great. Don't love to get issues, but do love to see them reported so we can get them resolved and fixed and get things improved for everybody. As well, for all our projects, so the CLI, the reusable controls, and the PnP.js libraries, absolutely welcome your contributions. So your pull requests. For the last release, had a record number of contributions to the PnP.js libraries for that release from the community. So that's really awesome, really great to see, and hope we can keep that up. That's really encouraging. And as well, finally, you can provide us feedback on sort of anything we do, right? Whether it's these calls, whether it's the libraries, the code, the samples, the demos, etc. I love to hear that feedback. We can't always act on every piece of feedback immediately, but we do take them, consume them, discuss them inside the core team, and definitely do our best to respond to all that feedback. So take heart. Sometimes change is slow, but we do hear you, and we are always working to make things better across all of the various areas. So appreciate all the feedback, appreciate all the contributions, and appreciate all the great demos from everybody out there in the community. So now, before vacation, we're going to get Vesa one more time and hand this off to the SharePoint Framework update from engineering. If you want to grab the presentation and take over, Vesa.
Yeah, I'm just doing that. So here we go, and the audio should be fine. So this is the second call on this week, so it's good to see still 93 people in the room. And obviously the situation hasn't really that much changed from Tuesday evening or Tuesday, because now it's Thursday. So, but we're actually having quite a lot of progress obviously on making sure that the next release of SharePoint Framework and capabilities are also getting documented and working on samples and all of that. So, but quick update in here, nothing really too dramatical. Obviously the classic slides, documentation, AKMS, SPDev docs. If some documentation is missing, you need something to be changed, please give us feedback there as well, so we're able to make sure that all the needed guidance is available. The second thing, which I've been having actually recently quite a few meetings, and we're working on streamlining this process, is that because from a standard SharePoint Online support, you can't get support for SharePoint development topics. We have this SharePoint Dev Docs issue list where you can go and ask questions. And this is so much better channel than sending an email from somebody, because we actually triage these issues which are getting in, and then we assign them to the actual feature crews and engineers inside of the SharePoint engineering in Redmond. So rather than sending an email for somebody asking help on my API isn't working or the API might have issues, please go here and report your findings, and we can start working on that one as fast as possible. We do now have a group of 3 to 5 people who are helping us from a support side of the house on incoming reports, and then we prioritize our action based on those labelings which they do and the initial triaging what they do as well. Now, and that's going to help on catching up on the queue over there. Now, one reminder, so a week ago, I think it was actually a week ago on Thursday, we announced that we are opening up the SharePoint developer blog for MVP articles. So if you are an MVP, this is only for MVPs for now, potentially for other people in the future, and you have something fresh or some fresh content, it might be something which you just blogged in your blog posts or your blog, or you're writing something new, you can actually submit that to be released inside of the official SharePoint dev blog. So our content team will review the content, and they will get back to you typically in 5 to 7 days to give you input on your submission. So, but really, This is a great opportunity for MVPs to gaining additional visibility if you're already an MVP. And if you're an MVP, you still need to get visibility because you need to get renewed as well. So good way of getting additional exposure for the community. That's a fair point, actually, Jim. That is a fair point. So MCMs absolutely should have actually included that on a text as well. Maybe we'll go and update the blog post. MCMs absolutely welcome as well. MCM is for those who do not know what is an MCM, it is a Microsoft Certified Master certification which existed from 2008 until 2015 or something like that. And there's less than 100 MCMs in the world. Technically, the MCM is something which you once achieve. It will never expire because it is a dinosaur developer's certification. That's a good way of putting that, Paul. So one way of putting that. We had 18 rotations of MCMs. I know that because I was an instructor in all of the 18 rotations within, what was it, 6 years or something like that. That was pretty cool. Anyway. Now, other stuff. Quickly, just showing you updated numbers, or not numbers, but updated charts on SPFx. So if you are wondering, are people using this? Answer is absolutely. Already on 1st of January this year, SharePoint Framework was much more widely used than SharePoint add-ins in SharePoint Online. And from the 1st of January until yesterday, we grew already 370% increase on the usage, and you can pretty much see on the left side of the chart, and this is third-party custom SharePoint Framework solutions. The left side on the chart, what you can see here, is that has a much even higher adoption curve, and that's the actual users. So we're talking about millions and millions of actual users who are using SharePoint Framework in practice. I can't give you an exact number due many reasons, but this gives you a meaning, or this gives you an insight on the adoption rates in SharePoint Online. There's some internal jokes related on MCM on the. Thank you, Jim. The WUP is always great. Cool. On the 1.7, we went this through actually in the monthly community call, which was on Tuesday, and we had even Pat Miller, who's the engineering manager for SharePoint Framework, doing live demos on the dynamic data and on the list subscription. Just quickly kind of repeating these, and if you're interested in seeing a live demo on dynamic data, have a look on that recording. The recording went live on YouTube yesterday. So the dynamic data means the fact that you can make connections between the web parts, and there will be a native out-of-the-box UIs to do the connection. So web part can expose data, and if it's serving or exposing a data, it is available from the out-of-the-box UIs, so you're able to kind of subscribe to that data as well. Out-of-the-box web parts like list view web part, list library web part, and a few other web parts will obviously then expose some data, and then you're able to implement a custom web part which is then using that connection. So basically knowing which one is connected or selected from the list and so on. Preview, then if we move on to GA, to the preview side of the game, and please do remember, mute yourself. There was a hiccup on the audio, and somebody actually helped me on closing that. Good. So the preview 1.7 will contain preview of domain isolated web parts. So if you have, let's say, security challenges, or you don't like the idea of JavaScript running in the context of the page, domain isolated web parts actually isolates existing web part in an iframe. And that's basically one attribute which you add on the manifest, the web part manifest, and after that it will be actually executed in an isolated domain. So adding you a browser level security where the web part cannot access any of the other elements on a page. List subscription means that you're able to subscribe to events in lists. So basically a web part can say, or an extension can say, whenever there's changes within this list, I'm highly interested in those, so let me know. So basically you can have a really dynamic page which is updating all the time based on incoming messages in the lists and web parts and all of that. SPFx components in Teams. This means basically writing a web part. It can be hosted in Teams as well. As such, it doesn't require any additional implementation. You can take advantage of the Teams context as well if needed. Supporting provider-hosted solutions. This means that existing Teams solutions can be actually hosted in the SharePoint side. So that's really cool as well. And then the up pages means that you basically are able to have a developer-designed pages which the end users cannot edit. So basically, you control the layout of the page, and you're able to add content there as a developer. So you have a full control. End users cannot modify the page content, which is a interesting thing. The 1.7 that's scheduled, officially we're saying by end of this year. Unofficially, we're targeting that hopefully to get already out by end of October. I can't promise that. It might be slipping to, let's say, November, mid-November, something like that. But we definitely want it to get out before the holiday season starts in the USA or US, because that's typically when, well, that's not a good timing to release anything just before Christmas. Now, moving on things, let's actually jump on the PnP.js side. And if there's any questions on those items in the roadmap, if you have any questions, I'm going to follow up on the IM window as we move along on the other topics of today. But Patrick, take it away.
Thank you. So quick updates here on some of the patterns and practices stuff. So for the PnP.js libraries, I just want to say again, thank you to everybody that contributed for the 1.2.2 release. Like I said, most contributors we've had in a single release, so that's really fantastic. Love to have that. So if you want to contribute, want to get involved, please do. If you're not sure how to get started, just reach out. We'd love to help you with that. As well, wanted to mention, I did push a release yesterday, 1.2.3, which, so this was simply to solve, so as part of 1.2.2, we did some really unglamorous work, but we updated the entire build pipeline, and updated the solution to use Webpack 4. And in so doing, I'd say we, but it was me. I made a mistake. So in the Webpack bundles, we ended up with some ES6 code in bundles that were targeted to be ES5, which is obviously not any good. So got that fixed, got that pushed out yesterday, and apologies if that affected anybody. Hopefully it did not. Again, it was only the bundle files, the ones that include all of the code. So hopefully that didn't affect anybody, but if it did, my apologies, but that should now be resolved. Of course, if you still see trouble with that, please just let me know. And wanted to mention as well, check out issue 267. Some folks are working to add project server support. So if you're interested in helping out with that, or want to kind of just check in on what's going on, you can follow that issue. And if you'd like to help out, please comment there. I think it's going to be fantastic. It's an area we haven't gotten into before. So some folks reached out, so they were interested in doing it, and I think that's fantastic. So if folks want to help out, please reach out there. I'm sure the more help, the merrier. And then a couple links down there at the bottom. PnP github.io/PnP.js is the documentation for the PnP.js library. You can follow the PnP.js hashtag on Twitter. You can also follow me at MediocreBowler on Twitter. And we will, I don't post a ton of stuff, so you'll mostly get updates about the PnP.js library and other SharePoint-related stuff. So did as well. This is our first meeting really since the end of last month, which would be September. So wanted to update everybody on the numbers, and the numbers are really amazing to me each month. So we're up to 1.4 billion requests in the month of September. Went through the PnP.js library, and that's across all versions that are out there and deployed and running. And it's now in 5,329 tenants, which is really amazing. And really, again, I want to say thank you to all of you out there who are using it in your projects and are bringing it out there into your customers. I'm glad it seems to have been valuable, and continues the adoption continues to go up. And the bottom right graph there is the downloads by month off of NPM. And I just picked the PnP/SP package just as an example. But in September we had about 9,000 downloads in the month of September, which is really again astounding growth. I'm not sure what happened in June there. We had 136, so that's strange, but we're up to about 9,000. So really great. And again, I want to say thank you to everybody out there that's using the library and everybody out there that has contributed back, whether that's an issue or whether that's a contribution or whatever else. So it's thanks to all of you that we've been able to grow the library in this way. So thank you.
Patrick,
Yes.
just a quick comment on somebody might be freaking out on how would you know that it's being used. So can you quickly explain how we track the usage of this library? So this applies also to PnP PowerShell and PnP CSAM Core. So the logic is exactly the same.
Absolutely. We have not snuck into your house and aren't tracking you. So all of the PnP stuff, and we've talked about this before, so this shouldn't be hopefully a surprise to folks, but what we do is we use the xClient tag header, which is a SharePoint header that is used by some of the out-of-the-box libraries to track usage. And so what we do is we just put a tag in there that lets us pull out that data from the internal Microsoft systems. And so it's going through the standard Office 365 telemetry. And the only information we're really collecting in the PnP.js case is the tenant and the version, and the fact that you're using PnP.js. Some of the other things, so PowerShell, for example, and I think, right, Visio, the CSAM library also captures the method that was called.
Yeah, that's true.
But we are not capturing any data associated with those requests. For example, we're not capturing the body of post requests. We don't have any access to anything like that. This is just the version, and in some cases, the method that was called and the fact you're using the PnP stuff. So that's how we get this data. It comes through the normal Office 365 telemetry and gives us essentially these numbers. We don't really have a whole lot more detail than this. Like I said, we can break it out by tenant, but nothing else, right? So that gives us the tenant count, the 5,300, and it gives us the number of requests. But we can't really drill down and see even the URLs that are being called, right? So we, stuff like that. So we're not getting any PII info out of this at all, just to be super clear. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, very happy to talk about that, offline or as well in future meetings if need be. But very excited about the growth. Really good stuff. And again, thank you to everybody out there for making that possible. So updates now for the Office 365 CLI. New version 1.7.0 with commands for exporting flows, retrieving information about flows, about their execution, managing webhooks, managing group settings, tenant settings, and modern pages. As well, in progress, a cross-platform PnP starter kit setup script, and additional commands. And as always, Waldeck is very open to hearing ideas for folks, commands they'd like to see. And the CLI has a lot of open issues marked as help wanted. So if you're looking for a place to get involved and like the CLI, I want to work on that, absolutely welcome to contribute there as well. So please do contribute there. Of course, all our projects are open to contribution. npm install-g gets you the Office 365 CLI, and for more information, you can follow the aka MS-O365 CLI link down there at the bottom. You can follow Office 365 CLI on Twitter. There's a Gitter channel associated with the CLI, as well as the docs are at that link I mentioned before, aka MS-O365 CLI. So definitely check this tool out. It's a great cross-platform tool, especially if you can't, for whatever reason, use the PowerShell. It's super powerful to kind of not be a full replacement, but is a great replacement for a lot of the PowerShell functionality and is getting better with every release. So definitely check that out. It's a fantastic tool and really great for folks that work in the command line a lot. Now an update on the reusable components. No big updates right now in terms of versioning for these controls, but always like to mention there's two flavors of reusable controls. The first are property controls. So these would be controls that you use in the property pane. So when you edit your web part, your SharePoint framework web part, put it into edit mode. A lot of great controls. And then as well, we have content controls, which are more for use in the body of the web part. And those, there's a whole set of those. And the biggest ones are the placeholder control and the web part title control. There's a whole bunch of different pickers, like a taxonomy picker, a people picker. I think there's a color picker, a whole bunch of great editor controls. Definitely check those out. Save you a lot of time. They are all implemented with Office UI Fabric styling, so you're going to look like they're right out of the box from the get-go, blend right into your solutions, and look very slick. Save you a lot of time. Definitely check these out. 2 links down there at the bottom to the SPFx property controls and SPFx controls React. I should mention they are React-based controls. So if you haven't checked them out, they are React-based. Sorry, I think I didn't mention that above. But check out both those links. They're very cool. Will save you a lot of development time. And this is another area, if you're looking to get involved and want to work on React controls, that's an area you have interest in. Check out the reusable controls. Your contributions are absolutely welcome there, whether it's introducing a new control to one of those libraries or enhancing, fixing up an existing control. All of that is welcome. So definitely check that out, and would love to have your contributions. With that, we'll move on to the demos. Joel, are you ready to go?
Yep.
Great. Well, if you want to take over the yes, we can. So if you want to take over the presentation, we will get you started. And then as Joel is getting started here, I'm going to scroll up and see if there's any questions I might have missed.
Can someone let me know if you can see my screen?
I just got it on my end.
Okay, so my name is Joel Rodrigues. I'm Portuguese. Moved to the UK 5 years ago. I work as a development consultant for corporate project solutions, which basically is development for client projects. And you can see my social details, their Twitter account and my blog if you follow it. I don't blog that much or as much as I wish I could do, but sometimes I still post some information there. So let's get rid of this. I also have a blog post. Can you? Yeah, you can. I also have a blog post explaining the details of the setup that I did to integrate the Office.js. Sorry, I just got a warning. Can you still see my screen?
Okay.
Okay. So I have all the details here if you want. The demo is also now on the updated to SPFx 1.6 recently. And this was based on the available documentation on Microsoft Docs. You have some information here and samples, for example, like that, but they are plain JavaScript, so I did convert that to TypeScript, and some of the code you can get it from my solution as well. So let's have a look at it. Localhost running. So the user experience is not that special. I just put some controls there. And you are asked for a URL for the document, and this is important because that URL needs to be from here, from the web client, and then by pasting it here, it gets parsed, and an iframe is embedded on the page with the properties. So the part that I did for this demo is the Visio files can have information embedded on it. In this case, it's just the hyperlinks, and as I click on the shapes, we basically load the data from the corresponding diagram. So this was based on the work for a client project that I did together with Visio MVP, David Parker. I think he's on the call as well. So he's the Visio expert, not me. Anything related to work on the Visio files was him. I just used the API to extract that data. So basically, you can add all sorts of custom properties to Visio and then use the API to extract that data. And for example, the scenario we did was business processes. So you could have, for example, a diagram with a business process where you could click on one of the shapes. You'll get lots of information here and then the link to the next process and things like that. And the page will refresh. The diagram will refresh without refreshing the page with the next diagram. So if we look at, so this is basically the sample. We just extracted data from there. And the code is just a subset of what we did there. In terms of setup, you have to use the embedded JS file from the CDN. And the easiest way to do that is to use Rancor's tool to just generate the externals declaration you need here on the config file. So basically just include a reference to the external file and then give it a global name, wherever you want, Office.js, for example. Next, I imported that file into my web part. It can be done simply with an import like that. But the problem is you're still missing the types for TypeScript, and everything will give errors everywhere. So you need to install the types, which contain lots of things, not only Visio. But that just doesn't work straight away because you need to go to tsconfig and include Office.js types here. Without these, it won't work. This is absolutely essential. I have no idea why, to be honest. I don't know tsconfig that well, or why in this case it doesn't work well. Maybe someone can give some insights on that. It took me a bit to realize I had to add it here. So hopefully, if someone has to do some work on Visio, just follow that article I wrote, and the configuration should be that easy. In terms of the code, because the API is expecting some callbacks, so if we go back to the documentation, we can see that, for example, we have page load complete event, which fires when the page on the Visio file is loaded on the screen. So you need those hookups to trigger your code. Otherwise, you have no way to know if the diagram has loaded or not. And you also have the document load somewhere. Yeah, document load complete, which is similar to that one. And in this case, you basically get a reference to the to the document that is loading, and you add a function, a delegate function here. And I did add some issues with this, which I'll show you in a second. But to handle that, I'm basically on my on my React component, I just declared two example functions. One is get all shapes, which basically prints out all the shapes that I retrieved from the file. And the unselection changed, which is when you click on different diagrams, on different shapes on the diagram, and it's when we extract, how we extract the data. So basically on the constructor for this component, that's where I done the work of adding, passing the functions into my service. And then on the component did mount, I just call the load method, which I created, which then goes and loads the embed session on the page, and then carries on when the I can show you actually, it's probably easier to follow like here. So basically to the init, and that's the dirty part I'll show you in a second. And on the init, we basically do instantiate a session object, which we will need for any queries from now on. We give it some properties, so the ID of the iframe you can define, so you have a little bit of control there, and the size as well. So this is just some example, but you could potentially maybe underuse a sample. I don't know if, I know it relates to iframes, I don't know if it's probably relevant here. So this piece of code basically creates, where is it? This iframe here with the diagram. You can also customize some things like disabling hyperlinks on the diagram itself, diagram boundaries. So basically do some customization on the embedded session there. After loading, where is it? Here. So after the session is loaded, we add the custom handlers to the API, which is basically the documents, the functions that I've passed from my React component, document load and page load complete, and also the onselection change. The problem with these ones is I have to add a timeout here to basically test it on IE. So the API will fire back the functions that I pass on Chrome and Edge, like 99% of the time. IE doesn't work. I did not find the reason why. I tried to contact the Visio team. They said it's working for them. I have no idea what's going on. So just to make this sample work on IE, I just added a timeout here, and if the functions don't fire automatically by the Visio API, I fire the functions and then just use a flag to control if that has already run. That works fine in my case because, of course, the timeout, you should try to implement something better if you use this approach and use some way to check if the iframe is on the page. But in this case, I don't need the args that are being sent back, so that's fine. You get back like the document name and the page name, which most of the time are not that relevant. We can see this in action here. So if I clean this. So, for example, we can see that I've loaded 3 shapes, and you can see that you have all sorts of things, and in this case we're using hyperlinks. So the collection of data that gets returned is not that great most of the time, but similar to JavaScript client object model, if you want something to compare against. And you basically have, in this case, you have the description and the address for the links. If we click on a shape, so we can see that selected shape here, and I'm also logging the shape data as well. So this is just an example. All the other functions that you can use work in a similar way, so you can use the same pattern, or if you come up with a better way to do it, let me know. I can update a sample or submit a PR. On the properties side, if someone is playing with this, so this URL here, you can also build it, and I left a method here, generate embed URL. You basically need to pass the file name. I should have cleaned up this a little bit more. Basically the content tag and the file name properties, and it will give you back the URL that you need for consuming that. So you can, for example, use, I don't know, like a document, an item ID or something like that, or have a file picker here for a better experience. That's me. There is not that much. Forgot to mention this. So you have to basically load properties. So similar to the system approach in SharePoint, you basically have to load all the collections that you need before you use them. And depending on the number of shapes, in this case, I'm loading for all the items beforehand. You may, if you have loads and loads of shapes, and it's not likely that the user will use all the shapes on a diagram, maybe you just want to load them on demand. In this case, I have 3 shapes, so it made really no difference. Even having a significant number of shapes, I did not see any impact on performance doing it like this, so it might work for you as well. And that's really it. Any questions?
Great stuff. Thank you, Joel. If there's questions, please, you can pop them in the IM window. Joel, I think you'll stick around and maybe answer those. And as always, sure. You can reach out to folks on Twitter and whatnot as well. So really cool demo, really neat integration with Visio. That's not something I don't think we've seen on the call before. So always great to see new stuff. Really interesting to see the different ways of integrating with things and how folks accomplish that.
Can I quickly share something?
Sure.
Where is it? So the Visio file, someone asked, download. And you basically have to this is where David Parker comes in. And I'm still waiting for Visio to open on my machine. Sorry. There you go. And you basically have to enable the shape sheet for the data, and then when you click on the shape, you can see, in this case, I have just the default collection of properties. Oops, I didn't click on the shape. There you go. And for example, in this case, we were looking at hyperlinks, which are here. So I'm basically loading the data from here, but you can have your custom data here as well. And you can retrieve it via the APIs. Okay.
Cool. Good stuff. Thank you very much for that. And Andrew, are you ready to jump in with your demo?
Yep. Please let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see the screen?
Got it. Yep.
And got it as well.
Nice. Thank you for having me today. My name is Andrew Keltikov. I'm a SharePoint developer at Arva Systems, Microsoft MVP in Office Service and Services category, a member of PnP core team, and I'm an avid fan of JavaScript, and I caught cold, so sorry about my voice today. In demand, please feel free reaching me in Twitter or GitHub. And today I'm gonna talk about a pretty rare scenario, which is in its order brings some pain when you don't expect the case. And the case is DOM element dynamic width tracking. Not far ago, I put a sample web part to SPFx examples with a responsive Facebook plugin based on iframe embedment and dynamic width tracking. And Vesa asked me to demo the approach I used, and who can resist to Vesa? Obviously nobody. So I'm showing this pretty simple and partly arguable problematic and solution. There are some situations in client-side development when third-party libraries or models expect absolute dimensions as their input. And document window object on resize event sometimes doesn't help. Also, DOM elements have no on resize event by default. Some techniques like long polling is definitely not our option because it's just ugly. It would be really cool to have some on resize for div elements in the DOM object model. Before diving into code, let me briefly elaborate on when and why we ever need this. Not saying any names, but some models in the wild just expect absolute values. And for instance, different social widgets, the embedded content, which based on iframes, and some complex components which calculates their proportion and also rely on absolute dimensions, different layers with hovering animations. Well, to summarize, I would say that sometimes it's difficult to imagine the situations when we need this, but when it's actually required, it brings a lot of problematic. Okay, so demo time, let me switch to samples. First of all, let's observe the situations with obvious window at event listener. I have tiny TypeScripts, and I'm going to execute TypeScript right in a browser with the help of PnP.js console, a part of Chrome editor. So first of all, I applied the event which tracks the changes of the window and pollutes the console with the dimensions and also colors the section into this favorite color. So when we move the window or change the window somehow, it constantly monitors for element changes and can react with some actions. And why I don't like this approach? Actually, I doesn't, but sometimes there are situations when something changes without actual Windows resize. For example, some styling, dynamic styling applied, or some DOM manipulations happened, which I absolutely not encouraged to do, but well, shit happens. Let me wipe the window and switch to the second sample. So this part of code adds event listener on the DOM element, and also colors the section into Chris Khan's favorite color. Okay, so if we change the window size, you can see that the event has happening only when the actual size of the area which we are interested in is changing. So it happens that after a specific size, the max width is applied, and so it never changes. Okay, so to achieve this, I'm using the approach which a little bit complicated. I'm not even going to dive into what's happening behind the scenes here, but would say that some object creation and its event are involved into the process. And I would definitely say that I don't like to copy and paste such code snippet into the different projects in which I'm going to support. And what we do in these situations, search for NPM model, if exists, if nothing, create our own. So what I did and published on resize, on element resize model, but before switching to this one, let me elaborate a scenario with the iframe embedment. This model is applied within the SPFx samples. So on this page, we have an out-of-box web part with the iframe embedment. And what's not good in this case that if we change the width of the window after the page was rendered, it doesn't change the width of the iframe. And on example, on the Facebook social plugin, it expects absolute width. So it behaves like I'll cut off a part of the so it's visible in this case. So I will cut off the part of the web part and won't be showing this. This is absolutely not very cool. But by applying the on resize model within a SPFx solution or well, any client-side application, we achieve the situation when on element dimensions changes, and specifically widths in this case, we can trigger the change and reload or rebuild, re-render the content. So the models which are were not made to be responsive can behave in responsive manner. Okay, so let me maybe switch to the sample. Okay, so this Facebook web part. Oh, before doing this, we'll show its properties. So it's actually a pretty simple web part which receives the company name from Facebook registry, some settings, and the most important part that it behaves in a responsive manner. Okay, so this web part is published to SPDef web parts samples called React Facebook plugin. Okay, so if to dive into the code and the component, you could see that it's pretty straightforward and simple. So just as simple as 44 lines of code. And all the magic is happening here in the component resizable. So it's a component imported from the on resize and it acts, well, it's a React helper which has a render method, and when resize of the specific DOM element is happening, where we place this, it triggers re-render and passes widths in a pretty declarative and simple way. So we can just use this as a parameter for React component or whatever, do the calculations and show responsive content. Okay, what I wanted to show else? Yeah, a few words about the component itself. So it has a React helper, which I showed on the sample of the Facebook web part. So just as simple as you can see it. And also it provides a vanilla way, so a little bit more complicated, but actually pretty straightforward. So in vanilla way, we can select document an element by query selector and define a handler and add resizable listener or remove resizable listeners when we need, and when the component, when the element widths or dimensions has been changed, only then the handler triggers, and this allows to achieve some rare but painful scenarios. And it has some advantages over listening of window element, because if the width has been changed with the same without changing the width of the window, maybe I can demonstrate this too. So let me try to enlarge. Oh, not this. Enlarge the window. Select something here. Maybe. Oh, also go to the normal mode. Okay, so what can be? So the situation maybe something happened. They changed the width of the row. Okay, so width, and some value, not this one. Oh, width, not width, and let it be 100%. So it was changed. Well, with styling manipulation, DOM manipulation in this case, but the web part was able to react to this change. So that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Great stuff. Really cool. Another great technique, another great sample. Really appreciate that from Joel and Andrew today. And if I can figure out getting, nope, that's not what I want to do. Manage content, share that. I don't think it wants to be, I don't think I want to reshare Andrew's desktop. So 2 great demos. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate that. Always great to see what's going on out there in the community. We have just a couple minutes left, so I think we're going to skip over the Q&A in favor of closing things out, getting Vesa on vacation. So our next SPFx JS meeting will be on schedule October 25th. That's in 2 weeks. And remember, our next general dev SIG will be on November 1st. So next week is canceled for the general development SIG. We'll resume October 25th with the SPFx JavaScript special interest group, and then November 1st with the general development interest group. So thank you, everybody, for joining the call. Very much appreciate everybody's time and contributions, and look forward to talking in the future. Thanks all, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have fun on vacation, Vesa.
Thank you.
Bye, Vesa. The more I can get him to respond, the longer he's here and not going to vacation.
Bye-bye. I will still need to do some emails, so all good. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.